We want to donate to the critical races and the most impactful organizations because we want to help Democrats win elections up and down the ballot to change the power, to the balance of power, so that we have control instead of what the Republicans currently have in our House. And we want to build voter power and protect the freedom to vote. We know that being a donor can be really frustrating. I'm sure you are all getting a million texts and emails begging you to give. It's overwhelming to try and sort out who are these people, should I give? When, Nancy Pelosi says, if I don't give in the next 10 minutes, our democracy is going to hell. I just, as one of our members said, I rage donate, and that doesn't give your money in the best way. And we want to help you at least make contributions that are going to matter and have an impact. We know that millions of dollars that are donated to Democrats end up being wasted, and they're wasted either because they're given to races that we can't win or races that have plenty of money. In 2022, we gave $25 million to both Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. I'm fans of both of them, but neither one of them had any chance of losing their race. And then lots of people gave to Marcus Flowers, who is the guy who ran against Marjorie Taylor Greene, because we hate Marjorie Taylor Greene. But the truth is, she lives in an overwhelmingly red district, and no matter how much money we throw at the race, she's not going away. When we look at our track record with the Crimson Goes Blue portfolio, over a third, so we know that over a third of individual donations to Democrats in the Senate and the House are given to races that are decided by more than 10 points. If a race is decided by more than 10 points, it wasn't close, and the money probably really didn't help. In 2020, for our candidates, 85% of the funds went to races decided by single digits. And in 2022, all of our Senate races that we supported were won by less than 10 points, and 84% of the House races we chose were decided by single digits. So we've been choosing really well, and we've done that with our partners at Swing Left who help us crunch the numbers. And then people wonder, well, why should I give money now? Like the election is so far out. But when candidates get money now, they can purchase advertising time that is much cheaper than if you buy it in October. It also, when a candidate raises a lot of money, it shows the viability of that candidate. And you may be able to get the other side to say, you know what, this guy is off and running. We're going to sort of bow out of that race and put our energies elsewhere so we can intimidate the other side. And I think we are, because Democrats really have been raising a lot of money. It also lets a campaign get the candidate's message out first, where you can define your own candidate and define the opposition as well. And then it allows you to staff up, to hire state and regional directors, staff up your field offices, and test out your field operations and get volunteers. So that really makes a difference. Right now, because Democrats are quite far ahead in the fundraising, Joe Biden has opened up 112 field offices in 9 swing states. Trump has opened up 0, the big 0. And we want to keep it like that. So how do we figure out, well, if there's all these races and all this stuff you have to think about, how do we do smart political giving? So it's true, we have to research thousands of state and federal races and civic organizations. And we need to then narrow the options to where your funding can move the needle. And we need to keep up with the changing priorities throughout the cycle. So our portfolio changes usually about twice a quarter as we see who's been raising funds and doesn't need so much more, who's got a competitive opposition candidate that we just learned about in a primary. We're reacting in real time to what's going on in the ground so that anytime you give $1 through the Crimson Goes Blue portfolio, you're giving it in the best way. Now, we have our target states you can see on this map. And we know that the presidency is really going to be won or lost in 7 states. Almost all of those states also have a Senate race that's going to be competitive. And then we have our states that have House races that are going to be competitive. You can see the numbers in blue here mean the number of competitive House races in that particular state. So you can see that California and New York are now in the pot, and that hasn't really been true before because they're not competitive for the Senate and they're not competitive for the presidency. We're gonna win those races, but for the House, it's really going to be key to us winning back the House. So we are trying to find the most competitive races that are consequential. You could have a competitive race somewhere where it's not going to make a difference. So we're looking at the consequential ones that can affect the balance of power. We look at how much money has been raised already, who needs help, who doesn't, and when it's happening in the cycle. In addition to sorting all that out with the candidates, we also have a balance in our portfolio of these community-based groups, which are really key to winning. The candidates need volunteers, they need local people who know the area and know the issues and can talk to voters. So we're looking at all of that and then balancing it across the country. So right now in our portfolio, we have 3 groups. We have the, oh my gosh, I was spaced on the name. The Community something for California. How embarrassing.
Communities for a New California.
Thank you, John. Don't turn 60, guys. Really, your brain. Anyway, and Battleground New York, where you're going to hear from the co-director tonight, and Leaders Igniting Transformation, which is a really effective group in Wisconsin that is mobilizing young voters of color. And then we look for opportunities. So I know everybody's been hearing about the craziness around abortion in Arizona. There's going to be a ballot measure supporting abortion rights. And so Arizona for Abortion Access is one of the groups we're supporting right now, because they are part of the coalition that is going to work not only to get this ballot measure passed, but in the process of getting that ballot measure passed, they will mobilize lots of Democratic voters. So those are the groups in our portfolio right now. And in a little bit, John is going to walk you through how you actually can give on our site and give through the portfolio and show you that you can do it with just one click, gives to all these groups. You will have the ability to opt out of the spam, and you'll feel better saying no to Nancy Pelosi next time she screams at you in a text, because you know you've already given the money in a smart way. So we do the research, you give, and together we're going to win this thing. And I want to introduce Gabby C., who is the co-director of Battleground New York, which is a coalition of labor, community, and advocacy organizations working to flip Congress through building the largest field program in New York State's history. Gabby has spent time helping elect Democrats from mayors and county commissioners to serving as President Barack Obama's Ohio political director in the 2012 campaign. She's the former political director for 1199 SEIU, the United Healthcare Workers East Union, which is the nation's largest local labor union, where she led a 40+ person team responsible for the union's political, legislative, and policy work along the East Coast. And Gabby currently serves on the boards of Workers Action Center and Win Black. So welcome, Gabby. We'd love to hear a little bit about Battleground New York and why it's so important to support community groups like yours.
Thank you so much, Janet. And thank you for that presentation. I think that is one of the most effective, concise well done, overviews of how political giving works, how folks can invest. You all heard that I've been a political director a few times over my course of my career. And Janet, I think you are very, very good at your job. So thank you for that. And I also want to say thank you for already investing in Battleground New York, for the folks that have given to this effort. We thank you so much. This is a very big effort that is going to require a lot of resources to do what we need to do in New York State and to do what we need to do for the country. So I want to tell you a few things that we don't like to talk about as New Yorkers. So I was born in Huntsville, Alabama, but mostly raised in Ohio and cut my teeth doing politics in Ohio. The first campaign I worked on was John Kerry's in 2004. And I was just a young person who wanted to end the war in Iraq. And he was talking about ending the war in Iraq. And I was like, I'm going to go work for this guy. I mean, John Kerry are going to change the world. And if you all worked on that campaign or volunteered, it was a miserable experience. And I vowed that I wasn't going to do any more politics. But 20 years later, here I still am. I moved to New York in 2016, so about 8 years ago, after being in DC for a little bit of time. And it was going to be the first time I lived in a blue state. And I was super excited about living in a blue state. Like, all the issues are going to be great. I always thought of New York as a progressive bastion. And then I moved there and I realized a couple of things that we as New Yorkers really don't talk about very much. The first thing that we don't talk about very much is that New York is way behind when it comes to voting reforms that we see that we standard across the country, that we see be standard in battleground states. One example of that is that this year, 2024, is the first year that we have absentee ballot where you don't have to have a reason to vote absentee. There were some adjustments to that during COVID, but the law went into effect this year for the first time. If you look at other blue states like California, they had no fall absentee voting since 1980, right? And so when it came to some of the voting reforms, early in-person voting didn't start until 2019 in New York State. That shocked me when I first moved there, because I always imagined this was a place that if I could early vote in the early 2000s in Ohio, for sure, I thought I was able to vote in New York. So our voting reforms, and it's still difficult to register to vote in New York. So we have a lot of work to do on voting reforms in the state. We don't talk about that a lot. The other thing that we don't talk about a lot is that New Yorkers don't really work well together. A lot of the big institutions that I'm going to talk about that are part of this coalition are often working against each other, whether it be candidates or on issues. Each of these organizations have sat across the table from each other because a lot of these organizations are big enough to go it on their own. One of the organizations I worked for, 1199, was the labor union, had 400,000 members across the union. They raised $2 million a year in their PAC, from their members, $10 at a time. And, they're just one example. And so New York is a state where organizations don't really have to coordinate and collaborate because they're able to move their agendas on their own. And the third thing I'll say is, the reason that I'm here is because New York is not as blue as it seems. If you look at the last election results, even the municipal elections that happened in 2021 and the one that happened most recently in 2023 in New York City, the most blue city of the entire state, we saw Democrats losing ground. We saw Republicans being elected in places like Eastern Queens, and Southern Brooklyn. These are, places that have traditionally been Democratic, and they're not anymore, and they're changing. And we really need to pay attention to that. And, one of the things that we know about New York is you usually win if you're running statewide in New York. If you're running for governor or senator or one of the other statewide offices, you usually win by running up your margin in New York City, because that's where the most people live. And then you do a little bit in the suburbs. You do a little bit on Long Island, and you do a little bit in the northern suburbs. That equation no longer works, in 2022 told us that. The day after the election in 2022, we saw something that we never thought we would see, and that is that New York was the reason why we lost the House. We lost in races where Joe Biden won just 2 years ago, where he won by a good margin in a lot of these districts. So a number of groups came together: 1199 SEIU, 32BJ SEIU, AFSCME, which represents state workers and federal workers and municipal workers, the Communication Workers of America, Indivisible, the Working Families Party, the New York State Nurses Association, and Indivisible, and Planned Parenthood. We all woke up, all these organizations woke up the day after the election in 2022 and had the same analysis, is that the only way that we are going to change the trajectory of New York becoming a purple state was to deeply invest in building out a robust field infrastructure across the state, but particularly in these key congressional districts. In those six congressional districts that we consider competitive are New York 3 and 4, which are on Long Island, New York 17, 18, and 19, which are in the Hudson Valley in the kind of lower tier, and New York 22, which is the Syracuse area. Now, two of those seats are defense seats. We have Congressman Ryan in the 18th congressional district, and then, as you all know, we had a special election in New York earlier this year where we flipped one seat already, and now have a Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi in that seat. And Battleground New York was active in that race. Within a month, we stood up an operation that knocked on 104,000 doors to make sure that we put Tom Suozzi over the line. And we're going to do that again in each and every one of these other districts where we need to, particularly where we need to flip the district. So, our idea that we deeply invest in field work, and we are a super PAC. So by law, we can't coordinate with campaigns. We can't coordinate with the Democratic Party. We have to build our own infrastructure, and that is what we're doing right now. And the second part of what we're doing is as we build up that infrastructure, we are investing in organizations that are on the ground that do this work day in and day out, and building out their capacity to do even more in the future. We have wonderful organizations, some of whom you probably have given to and heard about, organizations like Make the Road New York that does a lot of immigration organizing, organizations like Citizen Action that does a lot of organizing in northern parts of New York State. Community Voices Heard, which started as a welfare rights and tenant organization in New York City 25 years ago, that has grown into the Hudson Valley and mostly organizes women of color. So these are all organizations who have a track record of doing this work on the ground, that as we are building out this gigantic campaign infrastructure, we're investing in these organizations and making sure that we leave some capacity there to go. And we do that because door to door wins the war. We're going to talk a lot about, the investment that we need to make in media. That is super important, and it's super important in New York because it's a very expensive media market. But the way that we win is to talk to people and to talk to them often. And that is particularly true for the communities that around New York is working to mobilize, which are young people, people of color, women, and particularly people who have voted in past elections. Like they voted in 2020 and they might have voted in 2018, but they did not vote in 2022. We need to mobilize these people together. When we look at those 6 districts that I mentioned, the 2 on Long Island, the 3 in the Hudson Valley, and the 1 in the Syracuse area, there are about 100,000 people that are unregistered to vote. Right now, we are building out an operation to get that. We think about half of those are Democratic, and so we want to make sure that we understand who to target in some of those operations. But we're going to be not only registering voters and mobilizing them, but doing the accountability work so folks understand that these Republicans, like a Mike Lawler, who likes to cosplay being a moderate when he's in the district, and he talks about, how he's fighting for working class people. But what we know is when he goes to Washington, I'm in Washington right now in the airport lounge, he's siding with MAGA Mike Johnson every chance that he gets. He's voting for billionaire tax breaks every chance he gets. And so we need to make sure that New Yorkers know exactly who these Republicans are and how they are doing the opposite of fighting for them every day when they come to New York or when they come to DC. One of the things that is critically important, and we talked about this already, is investing in fields early, and particularly for vehicles like Battleground New York. The way that we invest in fields, and we do this in 2 ways. We invest directly in organizations, so we are granting to organizations on the ground to do some of this voter registration work, to do some of the capacity building by, finding new activists and knocking on doors and having issue-based conversations. But we also do that by hiring folks in these communities to go out and knock on doors and talk to their friends and their neighbors and the churches about that program. That is an incredibly expensive operation because we pay people a fair wage. We make sure they have health care. We give them a lot of training to be able to talk about the issues. And so investing in things like Battleground New York, and not only invest in our democracy, but it invests in the very people that we are fighting for, which is working class New Yorkers, who deserve representation in Congress and representation on that issue. And we want to develop the muscle to ensure that we never have a 2022 again. Never again can New York be the reason why we lose the House. We are 100% invested in making Hakeem Jeffries, who is my congressman in Brooklyn, the Speaker of the House, and we're going to do everything in our power to do just that. So thank you so much for your investment so far. Thank you for all that you will do. I'm happy. We're going to have questions at the end. Talk about Battleground New York all day, every day. That is, I actually have another job that this is part of what I do as a consultant. This is a big project and a very important one for me and a very personal one for me, because I want the state that I live in and the state that I call home to be a place that is leading the country. And I think the only way we do that is by flipping the House.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Reese. I am a volunteer with Crimson Goes Blue. I lead a team that works on promoting our Crimson Goes Blue portfolio. I work with Janet on sort of the nuts and bolts and back office stuff that makes it happen. And I'm going to take a few minutes to just walk you through what the process looks like when you make a donation. So this is our donation page. It's on the Crimson Goes Blue website. It's a link that we've posted in the chat, and we'll be posting it again, and hope you might use it tonight. If you end up landing somewhere else on the site, you just look for that donate button. It will bring you right here. There's a fair bit of information, some general information about the portfolio and the logic behind it, along the lines of what Janet has explained earlier in our program tonight. There are all kinds of frequently asked questions, including who's in the portfolio right now, what happens when I give, what does my receipt look like, what is the difference between all these different organizations that are being cited. But the real meat of the site are these donation buttons on the upper right side, in a number of preset denominations. And so let's take a look and see what one of those looks like. If you see a number that you want to give, hit that number. If you have a number in mind that doesn't match with one of those buttons, pick one that's close, because it's possible to adjust it as you go. We give you recommendations, but you have total control over how you donate, who you donate to. When you hit one of those buttons, it'll take you to an ActBlue page. And if you've ever donated through ActBlue before, it should look somewhat familiar. Ours has a couple of features. Down the left side of the page, there's a nice little thermometer that shows you what our progress is toward our goal of raising $2 million in the 2023-24 cycle. We're almost a quarter of the way there. Yay. Keep scrolling down that side, and there's some notes that you can refer to as you navigate the page. There's a list of who's in the portfolio with some brief explanations, recapping material that you would have seen on the last page if you were digging for that kind of stuff. And then down the right page column of the page, you see those individual names and our recommended allocation. So if I click the $1,000 button, I'll be giving $100 each to these three organizations. One of them is our own, Crimson Goes Blue, and $70 each to a number of members of Congress in a variety of states, 2 in New York, 2 in California, 1 each Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina. Bob Casey running for the Senate seat, or to re-elect to his Senate seat in Pennsylvania. But let's say I wanted to donate more than $1,000. I wanted to donate $1,300. And, I liked Gabby's discussion so much that I want to focus on New York. So the best way to change the amounts on these pages is to go into these line items and say, I'm going to give 170 to Josh Riley. I'm going to give 170 to Mondaire Jones. And I'm going to give 200 to Battleground New York, and you'll see that that total contribution number at the top of the screen adjusts as you go. What I don't want to do is change that number at the top of the screen, because if you do that, then you lose the recommended allocation that we've put on this page. Now, pro tip, if that happens to you, you can always refresh the page and it will take you back to that original allocation, but then you're sort of starting over. So the best way to do that is again, adjust those line items. When you're comfortable with all those amounts, hit that donate button. I'm got a little bit more of a budget and I'm trying to donate a little bit at a time. So instead of 1,000, I'm going to do 100 tonight, but it's important to focus on what happens next, particularly if you want to take advantage of this opportunity to opt out of sharing your email address or your phone number with all of these organizations and inviting the deluge of follow-on responses that will fill up your inbox. I'm going to hit that donate button. It's going to ask me if I want to leave a tip for ActBlue, which you can do, but it's absolutely not required. Tonight, yeah, no tip. They're doing all right. And then there we go. And now here's the key thing on the screen. This little box pops up and it says, "Thank you for your contribution. Would you like to share your contact information to stay updated?" If you don't wait for this screen before you close your browser and make a choice, the default is probably going to share your stuff. And I kind of don't want to, so I'm going to say not now. And that way my email address stays with me. If I decide I want to get in touch with these campaigns, great. I can do that, but I don't have to. And if you stay on this screen, you'll get something that's also really important for this whole process. And that is some ways you can share what you've just done with a sample Facebook post or a sample email message that you can send to friends, family members, colleagues, to anybody you know who might donate to Democrats this year. And do them a favor by sharing this great tool as a way to make their political donations this year and make political donations that count this year, that really have an impact. I'm not a big donor, but I want to still want to be sure that my dollars go where they're going to have an impact.